And before I proceed, I would like to know if I'm audible enough. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir, we are hearing. We are hearing you.
Okay, that's good. So we proceed. Now let me start by sharing my screen. Types of discourses. Now, what is a discourse? Sometimes when we write, we put individual sentences together for different purposes. Now, a collection of sentences is called a passage or a discourse. So basically, when you put individual sentences together, you have what we call a passage.
It's cutting. Discourse.
Like we say in logic,
Last week or your class.
you have a discourse. Now,
Those talking, please keep quiet.
please, if I have muted you, don't unmute yourself. Now, so we shall distinguish passages that are arguments and those that are not. We are in the business of studying arguments, so it's not unsurprising that at the beginning of this semester, we are trying to distinguish passages that are not arguments so that we learn how to distinguish arguments from non-arguments, and then we can begin to study arguments. So now let's begin with passages that are arguments. An argument is a discourse that contains a claim or conclusion that is supported with reasons or information. So a passage that contains a claim which is supported with reasons or information or evidence is an argument. That means an argument contains at least two items, or there are two basic components of an argument. First of all, you must have a conclusion, which you can also call a claim or a decision. Then you must have expressions that aim to provide support or proof for the conclusion, claim, or decision. So these are the two components of an argument. To spot an argument or in a passage, or to determine if a passage is an argument, you must identify a conclusion. And then you will also identify expressions around the conclusion that aim to support the conclusion or claim. Let's see an example of an argument. We have three statements here. Statement one, Ghanaian men think women don't deserve to occupy high positions. That's statement one. Statement two, they question the competence and qualification of women who are sent to high office, but refrain from doing same to even incompetent men. That's statement two. Then statement three, therefore Ghanaian men do not respect women. So we have three statements here. Now notice that the above passage has three statements. Statements 1 and 2 are serving as information, evidence, or reasons to support statement 3. So when you look at statements 1 and 2, they are providing information about the attitude of Ghanaian men to women. So for attempting to support statement 3, these statements are called premises. And then statement 3, which is being supported, is called conclusion. Now, when you look at the three statements, you see that you can examine their structures, and then you see that by the structure of statement 3, you are looking at a conclusion. For instance, statement 3 begins with therefore. So that already tells you are looking at the conclusion. And then statements 1 and 2 are providing information. So what statements 1 and 2 are doing is to provide information that leads to conclusion statement 3. And statement 3 is like, reaching a conclusion based on the information contained in statements 1 and 2. So that is how to spot an argument, or that is how to spot conclusions and claims, and then expressions that aim to support them, or expressions that aim to provide support or information or reasons. Now, how do we identify arguments? I just explained that to identify an argument in a passage, you need to find a conclusion or a claim, and then you need to find premises. To identify a conclusion or a claim, you need to identify a statement that makes an assertion or a claim. Then you need to find statements that provide reasons why that claim has been made. That's the mechanism of identifying an argument. But there are easier ways to identify an argument. You can also identify an argument by identifying certain words or phrases that show you that you are looking at either a premise or a conclusion. We call those words or phrases indicators. We have premise indicators, we have conclusion indicators. Now so for indicators that show you are, for words that indicate you are looking at a premise, we have a few examples here. Premise indicators include 4, granted that, in view of the fact that, in as much as. When you see a statement that begins with such words or phrases,
Why?
you
Where?
know that you are looking at a premise. Fred, Fred Anson, can you mute your mic? So when you see a statement that contains these words or phrases, then you are likely looking at a premise. Remember that the work of a premise is to support a conclusion. So in as much as the phrase "in view of the fact that," when you see a sentence that begins with "in view of the fact that," automatically it is a statement that is providing a factual reason. It must be a statement that is providing a factual reason for reaching a certain conclusion. In view of the fact that is obviously pointing to a factual statement. It's pointing to a factual statement. So such a statement is obviously providing evidence for a conclusion. And then there are other phrases. It is a fact that. When you see a sentence begin with "it is a phrase," it is a fact that. It is a fact that. Then it's obviously a factual statement. And factual statements are typically premises, because the work of premises is to provide reasons or information or evidence for the conclusion. The same thing goes for the rest of these indicators. One cannot doubt that, because the reason is that. When you see a sentence begin with the phrase "the reason is that," then it is obviously a statement that is trying to provide reasons for a conclusion. In that kind of case, the conclusion must have come first, and then the premises are following the conclusion. When a conclusion comes first, then a premise can say the reason for this conclusion is that, as shown by the fact that. That obviously points to factual statements, and factual statements are typically premises. Okay, so what are the conclusion indicators? Now, these indicators are not exhaustive. We just listed some here. So there should be other indicators. Conclusion indicators include therefore, consequently, hence, asserting that for this reason, accordingly, this being so. One of these words is contained in the example we saw. So if we go back to our example, statement 3, which is the conclusion, begins with the word therefore. So you can replace this therefore with any of these other conclusion indicators. You can replace it with consequently, and so on. Okay, so I'm coming. Just give me a few seconds. Let me sort something out. Okay, so I was talking about indicators. Now, so these are conclusion indicators. They tell you that obviously you are looking at a conclusion. But it is not every premises and conclusions that have indicators. In fact, you will never see a premise or a conclusion in your exams that will have indicators. No examiner would give such a cheap question. You can write arguments completely without indicators. So you must learn to identify arguments with or without indicators. You ultimately have to identify arguments by looking at what each sentence is doing or what each expression is doing. Some statements or expressions are doing the work of conclusions. Some others are doing the work of premises. And you have to be able to identify them. Now let's look at non-arguments. Not every passage or cluster of propositions is an argument. Some passages are non-arguments, such as narratives, instructional passages, rhetorical, polemic, or opinion. So we're going to look at these one by one. Let's begin with narrative. A narrative is a passage that reports a sequence of events according to the order the events occurred. For example, over the course of 2 weeks, some police officers have been observed stopping and checking cars in the area between Nsawam and Anyinam in the Accra-Kumasi Road. On the Accra-Kumasi Road, they extort money and abuse motorists who question their authority. Branding AK-47 assault rifles and dressed in heavy police gear, these officers do not just check cars, they also assault some motorists and passengers. Now, this passage is obviously a collection of factual statements, factual statements that show a sequence of events, or that show an event. So for that reason, we say that this passage is a narrative. Narratives are the easiest kind of passages to identify because all you need to do is just identify a collection of factual statements that are showing an event or a series of events, in a chronological order or in an order in time. Then we have instructional passage. Instructional passage is a passage that describes a process or a sequence of things to do in a specific order. It offers a list of directives to follow to accomplish some desired effects. Now, the example below offers a list of directives on how to use a fire extinguisher. So, example, pull the pin, aim the nozzle at the bosom of the fire. Aiming at the top of the flame with the extinguisher won't be effective. In a controlled manner, squeeze the trigger to release the agent. Sweep the nozzle from side to side until the fire is put out. So this example or this passage is a collection of imperatives. A collection of imperatives. No, so any passage that is a collection of imperatives or a list of imperatives designed to take you through a particular process or procedure is an instructional passage. Then rhetorical polemic. A rhetorical polemic is a passage communicating a usually strong feeling and persuasively venting an opinion. Example, I hate these lab tests. Every time I'm exposed to the disease plants, I fall ill. I'm sure they are punishing me or something. It's disgusting how I get sick so often. Now, in this example or this passage is a collection of emotive expressions. So statement 1, I hate these lab tests, is an emotive expression. Statement 2, every time I'm exposed to the disease plants, I fall ill. That is a claim. That is a claim. And then statement 3, I'm sure they hate me or they are punishing me or something. That's an emotive expression. And statement 4 is discussing how I get sick so often. That's an emotive expression. So in this case, you have 4 emotive expressions and a claim. Usually when you are engaged in a rhetorical polemic, when you are expressing your emotions, you have to make at least one claim so that we understand what you are talking about. I mean, you can't be expressing emotions without letting people know what you are talking about. So usually a rhetorical polemic is a collection of emotive expressions that also include at least a claim. You know, it is when people see the claim you are making that they will understand what your emotive expressions is about. Okay. So what it means is that rhetorical polemic is a collection of emotive expressions that might also contain a claim. And then argument is a claim surrounded by supporting reasons, a claim that is supported with reasons. So whilst an argument is a claim that is supported with reasons, an emotive expression is a claim that a collection of rhetoric, a collection of emotive expressions that might also include a claim. So that's the difference, the basic difference between the two, between argument and rhetorical polemic. Now to some exercises. Name 4 types of discourses studied in this chapter. What is an argument? List the components of an argument. Distinguish between argument and rhetorical polemic. So I want different persons to answer these questions. If you want to answer, you can raise your hand. Okay, so it seems that people have not made up their minds to answer these questions and we are losing time. So let me quickly answer them. Name 4 types of discourses. We have argument, narrative, instructional passage, and rhetorical polemic. What is an argument? An argument is a passage containing a conclusion and premises, or a conclusion or claim supported with reasons, information, or evidence. List the components of an argument. So you have a conclusion or a claim, and then you have premises. You have premises, which contain reasons, information, or evidence supporting the conclusion. Distinguish between argument and rhetorical polemic. An argument is a conclusion or a claim that is supported with reasons, but a rhetorical polemic is a claim surrounded by emotive expressions, or rhetorical polemic, collection of emotive expressions that might also contain a claim, that might also contain claims. All right. Now we move on to the next topic, verbal and real disputes. Now, it is said that a lot of disagreements in this world are what we call verbal disagreements. A lot of disagreements in this world are what we call verbal disagreements. They are not, we don't see them as real disagreements. So what are verbal disagreements, and why do we not regard them as real disagreements? So a verbal dispute is a disagreement about the meaning of a word or words. Example, that man is a Fanti. No, he's an Akan. So let's assume that two Americans, let's assume that two Americans in New York or two Russians in Moscow are talking about Fanti, or they are talking about Ghana. Loma, can you mute yourself? All right. Let's assume that two Americans or two Russians are discussing about Africa, and then someone says, that man on the TV is a Fanti. The second person says, no, he's an Akan. Now, these two people, one of them doesn't know that a Fanti is an Akan. So to dissolve this disagreement, the person who doesn't know that a Fanti is an Akan has to find out that a Fanti is an Akan. So it is a disagreement about what being a Fanti stands for, the meaning of being a Fanti. So the argument is proceeding because of the inaccurate meaning, understanding of the meaning of being of Fanti. And the second example, she's a Christian because she receives Holy Communion. No, she's not a Christian because she does not speak in tongues. So this disagreement is because it's a disagreement about what Christianity means. What is the meaning of Christianity? What does being a Christian mean? Once that meaning problem is resolved, then there wouldn't be an argument like this. So disagreements that arise because there is a problem with meaning, the meaning of a concept, we call them verbal disagreement. Then contrast such disagreements with what we call the real disagreements. Real disagreements are substantive disagreements about facts or values. Example, if two Americans or two Russians or two Chinese in Russia, America, or China are arguing about African countries, and then one of them says Accra is the capital of Ghana. The other person says no, Kumasi is the capital of Ghana. It means that this is a factual dispute, a dispute about facts. You dissolve it by verifying the facts. They are direct factual claims. So you resolve them by verifying the facts. Then the second one is a dispute about values. If we are designing a new country and someone says the capital should be here, the other person says no, the capital shouldn't be there, the capital should be here. That's a dispute about preferences. Let's assume that Kwame Nkrumah and the British colonial administrators were negotiating the independence of Ghana. And then in the negotiation, someone says, should we make Accra the capital of Ghana? And some other people say, no, we can't make Accra the capital of Ghana. We should make Tamale the capital of Ghana because they are interested in, they want the northerners to be more prominent in the affairs of the country, you know. Then those who want the capital to go to the south can say, no, Accra should be the capital of Ghana. So that's a dispute in values or preferences. You know. Yeah, Hilda, you raised your hand. Someone raised their hand, but she has brought it down again. Okay, so now this conflict about facts and the one about values or preferences are two examples of real disagreements. No. So now let's look at this exercise. Determine whether the following disagreement is verbal or real. Sandra says that man is quite old. He died at 50. That man is quite old. He died at 50. Comfort says you call that old. He died young. Now, is this a verbal or a real agreement?
It's a real agreement.
So, reasons.
So because it is talking about facts.
Which facts?
Please, the fact that the man is old because he's 50 years and is an old.
You need to raise your hand. You need to raise your hands and remain muted. Raise your hands and remain muted. A lot of people have raised their hands. So you have to talk one by one, beginning from the first. Prisla, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, sir. I think it is verbal because the two were making the argument verbally.
Yeah, increase the volume of your mic. Increase the volume of your mic, Prisla.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Hello,
so
sir.
you said it's verbal because
Both of them were making the argument verbally.
I know every argument is made verbally. You know, it's a verbal exchange. So the reason has to do with what is being contested, what is under contest. Now, Prince Ascot.
Yes. Okay, so the argument is real simply because the man died at age 50, and we all know that the age is the right answer. Comfort and Sandra knows that the man died at 50, so which is a real fact. You get it? So in this case, Comfort is trying to tell Sandra that the 50 years we can't classify 50 as old. But Sandra too is trying to counter that the 50 years, the man died at 50 means the man was old.
So what is being contested? Is it the fact that he died at 50, or the fact, or is it that 50 qualifies as old?
Yes. The fact that he died.
No, but you said that both of them accept that he died at 50.
Yeah. So the 50 is the fact, as in the 50 is the evidence. Is very, the 50 is very substantive, as in it's a substantive item, which supports both of their arguments. But Comfort is trying to tell Sandra that the 50, we don't qualify 50 as old. So over here, both agrees that the man that at 50, but one is trying to say that the man that died the man was old, so he died at 50, and the other one is also trying to say that he's young, although he died at 50. Okay. So it's a real argument. It's a real disagreement.
Yeah, but what Yeah, but what you are saying does not support that is a real argument, because you are saying that it is a disagreement about whether 50 qualifies as old or young.
Oh, okay.
And then Kumi Emil.
Okay, so said the disagreement, the dispute here is a verbal dispute. When you look at a verbal dispute, it's a disagreement based on the meaning of a word. The key word here is old. And now the two people have conflicting ideas on who an old person is. That's why I believe it's a verbal dispute.
Okay, that's fine. Faustina.
So I think it's a verbal dispute because the two of them are arguing about the meaning of old. One thinks 50 is old and one thinks 50 is not old. So it's a verbal dispute.
Okay, that's fine. Richard Akulem.
Hello, sir.
Go ahead.
This I think is a verbal. This I think is a verbal dispute because they are talking about old and they are being arguing about the age 50. So they don't know the other one. Comfort don't know whether age 50 is old or not. So it's a verbal dispute.
Okay, fine. So Richard Sam.
Yeah, I think it's a real disagreement because the fact that they all know the man died at 50 years. Okay, one is saying the man died at 50 years, and the other one is asking 50 is 50 young or 50 old. So what is the fact is that they have to verify either the 50 he died really at 50 or not. That's what I think. So the fact that they have to verify the fact the item that they have to verify is the 50 years. That's really years. That the man died at 50. So in doing that, it becomes a rare disagreement. Thank you.
Yeah, but Comfort agrees. Comfort doesn't dispute the fact that he died at 50. Comfort accepts that he died at 50, but she is questioning whether 50 is old.
Okay.
Yeah, so Samuel Yati.
So I think it's a verbal disagreement because Sandra, the whole disagreement is based on where is the starting point of 50, old or young, and so there's some disagreement between if it's old or young between Sandra and Comfort.
Okay, so Emanuela.
Okay, so I think it's a verbal disagreement too, because they are both based on the word old. Yes. So I think it's a verbal disagreement.
Okay, that's fine. Priscilla's mic is unmuted, but she didn't raise her hand. Okay, so let me see. Now I'll have to just make a comment and then we go ahead. So this matter about, these two people, the first person, Sandra, and the second person, Comfort, both of them, the first person says someone died at 50, and then the second person, and then she says that someone who dies at 50 is old. But the second person does not agree that someone who died at 50 is old. So it is a contest about whether dying at 50 can categorize you as an old person. People who die at 50, can we say they are old? I think that's the question that is coming out of the dispute. So, it is difficult to determine what. I don't know whose microphone is on. That is Kaja Simon.
Sorry, sir.
Now, So it is difficult to determine what makes somebody old. There are some countries where people, the average person lives up to 100 years. Many of them live up to 150, 120, and then there are some other countries where the average person dies at 60, 70. There are some countries where the average person dies at 80. There are even some countries where the average person dies at 45. So it varies from country to country. Now, those countries where people die mostly at 100 years, 120, and some even reach 50, the average person, will remain strong until 90. But in countries where the average person dies at 70 or 60, the average person will remain strong until 35, so it all depends on, and when you look at all these societies, there are factors why they, they have different lifespans. Those who live longer, they eat a different set of food, and they are in a different environment. Those who don't live long, they are in a different environment. Their food is different, their habits are different, and all those things. So when you check all of these things, then it becomes difficult to determine when you can say someone is old. In countries where people die at the age of 45, by 30 years, you should be old, Or in countries where people die at an average of 120 years, you are still young by 70 years. So because of that, because the meaning of being old has not been, it's not properly settled, or probably you can never settle it, it means it's a verbal dispute, because the word old does not have a settled meaning, The only thing we know about old is that the person has become infirm, A person is beginning to fail in a lot of activities in life. He's no longer able to cope with a lot of activities and those things. So that's it. And that is where the confusion is. In some countries, people of 90 can still be doing everything. And in some other countries, people of 40 years can no longer do certain things. Yeah, so that's it. Those are the kind of things you determine before you decide whether an argument is verbal or real. Now, when we say an argument is a verbal disagreement, we're not saying that it cannot be settled by verifying facts. After all, you have to verify the facts to know that a Fante is an Akan. What we're saying is that it is verbal because of the way the disagreement is proceeding. Maybe the disagreement is proceeding in a way that suggests that somebody doesn't have an accurate meaning of something. So the person needs to find out the accurate meaning, which is also like some kind of verification. But if something is a factual disagreement, it means that it's a direct disagreement over facts. The disagreement is about direct factual claims. That one is clearly a factual disagreement. There are many other disagreements that are not direct factual claims. Probably they are disagreements about theories or, complex theories. But you see that somehow the disagreement is because some parties have different notions of, one concept or one or two concepts. So it is not a direct disagreement about facts, but the disagreement is there because someone doesn't have an accurate meaning of something, or the meaning of something is not settled. So when you see a debate like that, you call it a verbal disagreement. So basically, a verbal disagreement is a disagreement that arises because the meaning of something has not been agreed upon or settled or fully, reciprocated. So that's it for today's class. In our next class, we'll discuss the differences between the normative and the empirical. We'll look at 6 senses of law. We'll look at certain fallacies in language. And then in the following, begin to study.
Hey, who is that?
Yeah, so why is your microphone on? Carter and Stephen Safu. Okay, so at this point, we can take some questions. If someone has something to ask, then we can quickly attend to such a question and then we end the class. Any questions? Yeah, Prince, go ahead.
Okay, so my question is, with a verbal disagreement, does it deal with different understanding of words or?
Yeah, it said it's about an understanding of words, the meaning of words.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right, so Tiki.
Sir, please, I want to get the meaning of a discourse.
A discourse is a collection of sentences.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and Priscilla.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to ask, in the case where two different people come as in narrate as a report, as in narrate something that happened, an event that happened. Hello, sir.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm saying that in a case where two people come up with a report about an event that happened, can that narrative, as in what was told, the report, can it change to, because both of them have different ideas on what really happened? Can you say that is a dispute because both of them have different, saw the event differently, or is still a narrative, a narrative, the word,
Yeah,
it's still narrative.
A narrative is a collection of factual statements, so if you have two conflicting narratives, it means that there must be factual statements that disagree. There must be conflicting narrative statements. If one person says that there was a disagreement about whether Commonwealth Hall should be enlarged to contain an additional 8,000 beds. And then the person says that the matter proceeded to court. And then another person says that there was disagreement. Richmond Ndamo, why is your microphone on? And then someone else says that there was a disagreement about whether Commonwealth Hall should be enlarged to contain additional 8,000 beds. Agnes Donko, why is your microphone on? Now, these two narratives are conflicting. And where does the conflicting lie? The conflict lies in the fact that the first person said that the Commonwealth Hall case proceeded to court. The second person said the Commonwealth case was resolved by the University Council. So which narrative are we going to accept? What it means is that you have to identify the factual statements that are in conflict, and then you settle the disagreements by verification. So if upon verification, you find out that it didn't reach the court, it rather ended at the University Council, then you know that the factual claim that it reached the court is false. So conflicting narratives are determined by verification.
So, sir, a narrative can become a dispute, argument, disagreement.
Yeah, there are conflicting narratives. That's a factual dispute.
Thank you, sir.
And then Deborah Ofusu.
Yes, sir.
Well,
Sir, please, can you explain the premise indicator again?
the what?
The premise indicator.
Yeah, the premise indicator is a word or a phrase that immediately tells you are looking at a premise. And so
Okay.
when you begin a premise by a word or phrase that, or that signals what that sentence intends to do. When you say, for instance, that as a matter of fact, so and so. When you begin a sentence with as a matter of fact, already you know that you are trying to make a factual statement. And
Okay.
factual statements are usually premises. So as a
Okay.
matter of fact is a premise.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. So now we have answered questions. Those whose hands are still raised, I don't know whether it's because you still have something to say or that you didn't take it down before, after your last question. Prince Ascot, do you have something to ask? Prince Ascot, if you don't have something to ask, then you can raise down your hand and mute yourself. Then our Dashel.
Unmuted.
Say,
Go ahead.
say, please, can you go over the verbal disagreement?
No, I can't because it takes a longer time. So you have to go back to the video. That's an entire part of the class.
Sir, I got disconnected.
Yeah, so you have to watch the video.
Okay.
All right, so I wish all of you a happy weekend. For our next class will be coming up by Wednesday next week.
Sir, please, I want to ask a question.
You wanted to ask about what?
Sir,
Thank you, sir.
sir, please, I didn't get the answer for the first example.
Which one?
Thank you, sir.
About the verbal and real
Yeah,
agreement.
it is verbal.
Please, it's verbal.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Enjoy.
Have a very nice
Thank you,
weekend.
sir.
Bye.
Thank
Bye. See you
you.
next week. Bye. See you next week.
Happy weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy
Bye.
weekend. Bye. Bye,
Hey,
sir.
student.
Hey,
Hey, sir.
what's that?